I stood in my grandmother's living room, surrounded by relatives I had known my entire life. Aunt Patricia's voice filled the space as she bragged about my cousin Brandon, just like she had done at every family gathering for the past 30 years. I had grown used to being invisible in this house, overlooked and underestimated. But today was going to be different. What my aunt did not know was that her perfect son, the one she could not stop talking about, had been working for me for the past 5 years. Before I share what happened at that reunion, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from today? Drop a comment and let me know. And if you have ever felt invisible in your own family, if you have ever been the one nobody believed in, this story is for you. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, because trust me, you do not want to miss how this all unfolds. Now let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up in a small town outside of Columbus, Ohio. My mother raised me alone after my father left when I was 5 years old. She worked as a nurse, pulling double shifts just to keep a roof over our heads. Our house was small, the paint was peeling, and the heating barely worked in winter. But my mother did everything she could to make it feel like home. Then there was my Aunt Patricia. She was my mother's older sister, and she had married Uncle Donald, a sales manager who made decent money. They lived in a bigger house, in a nicer neighborhood. Their son, Brandon, was 2 years older than me, and from the moment he was born, Aunt Patricia made sure everyone knew he was destined for greatness. Every holiday, every birthday, every family gathering took place at my Grandma Helen's house, and every single time Aunt Patricia would find a way to make Brandon the center of attention. My mother and I were always there, but we felt more like guests than family. I learned early on that in this family some people mattered more than others, and I was not one of the ones who mattered. Let me tell you about a Thanksgiving that still sits heavy in my memory. I was 12 years old. Brandon was 14. About 20 of us had gathered at Grandma Helen's place for the holiday meal. The turkey was carved, the sides were passed around, and then Aunt Patricia stood up like she was about to give a speech. She pulled Brandon to his feet and announced to the entire room that he had just made the varsity basketball team at his school. Everyone clapped. Everyone cheered. Uncle Donald patted Brandon on the back and said something about his son becoming a professional athlete one day. I sat there watching my fork frozen over my mashed potatoes. What nobody knew was that just 2 weeks earlier I had won first place at the county science fair. I had spent 3 months building a working model of a solar-powered water filtration system. My mother tried to bring it up. She said Ryan also won something recently. But before she could finish, Aunt Patricia cut her off. That is nice. But Brandon already has scholarship offers coming in. The room shifted back to Brandon. Nobody asked me what I had won. Nobody even looked my way. Later that evening, Uncle Donald walked over to where I was sitting alone. He looked down at me with that smug grin of his and said, "Hey, Ryan, you still reading those boring books?" I nodded. He laughed. "Maybe you should go outside more. Get some sun. You are too skinny." No girl is going to like that. The whole room laughed. Even my mother laughed, though I could see the discomfort in her eyes. But then, Grandma Helen did something I will never forget. She walked over quietly and sat down beside me. She handed me a slice of her homemade pecan pie and whispered, "I am proud of you, sweetheart. Do not let them get to you." I had to bite my lip to keep from crying. She was the only one who ever made me feel like I was worth something. The comparisons never stopped as the years went by. When I was 14 and Brandon was 16, he got his driver's license. His parents bought him a used car, and Aunt Patricia told everyone at the next family dinner like he had won an Olympic medal. Meanwhile, I was still taking the bus to school every day. One time, I needed a ride to a debate competition. My mother asked Aunt Patricia if Brandon could drive me. Patricia said no. Brandon needed the car that day. I missed the competition. When I was 16, Brandon graduated high school and got into a mid-tier college on a partial athletic scholarship. Aunt Patricia acted like he had been accepted into Harvard. She told everyone he was going to play professional basketball. She said the scouts were already watching him. At that same family gathering, nobody mentioned that I had just scored 1520 on my SAT, one of the highest scores in my school's history. I did not expect them to care. I had stopped expecting anything from them by then. 2 years later, I graduated high school and got accepted into the University of Colorado Boulder with a full academic scholarship. When I announced it at a family dinner, Aunt Patricia tilted her head and said, "Colorado, that is so far away." "Are you sure your mother can afford that?" Uncle Donald added. "Computer stuff. You will end up fixing printers for the rest of your life." Everyone laughed again. I did not respond. I just looked down at my plate and kept eating. That night, Grandma Helen found me sitting alone on the back porch. She handed me an envelope. Inside was $2,000 in cash. She told me she had been saving it for years. "For your new start," she said. "Go far away, Ryan. Show them who you really are." I hugged her and cried for the first time in years. She was the only person in that house who believed in me. The night before I left for Colorado, I sat in my small bedroom and looked out the window at the street where I had grown up. I made a promise to myself. I would never beg for their approval again. I would never try to impress them with words. I would let my actions speak, and one day they would have no choice but to see me. The next morning, I boarded a Greyhound bus with one suitcase and a heart full of determination. My mother cried at the station. I waved goodbye as the bus pulled away. That was the last time I let their words define who I was. College was not easy. The scholarship covered my tuition, but everything else was on me. I worked 2 jobs to survive. Every morning at 5, I made coffee at a campus cafe. Every evening, I assisted professors in the computer science lab. I slept maybe 5 hours a night. My meals were mostly instant noodles and peanut butter sandwiches, but I did not complain. I knew this was my chance to build something better. By the end of my first year, my GPA was 3.9 out of 4. By my junior year, I was leading research projects with my professors. I entered a statewide hackathon and won second place. I was building skills, making connections, and proving to myself that I belonged there. I did not call home often. When I did, my mother and I kept the conversations short. I never called anyone else in the family. I had nothing to say to them. Everything changed in my senior year when I met a man named Marcus Thompson. He was the vice president of engineering at a tech startup called Vertex Solutions. They had a booth at the campus career fair, and unlike the bigger companies with long lines, their table was almost empty. I walked over and handed him my resume. Most recruiters glanced at resumes for about 10 seconds. Marcus read mine for nearly 2 minutes. Then he looked up and asked me about a personal project I had listed, an app I had built to help people manage their finances. I told him about it. I explained why I built it, how it worked, and what I would improve if I had more time. He listened carefully, nodding the whole time. When I finished, he said something I will never forget. "Most students show me textbook projects. You built something real. That is rare." He invited me to grab coffee with him. We talked for 3 hours. He told me about his own journey growing up poor, being underestimated, working twice as hard as everyone else just to be seen. He understood me in a way no one else ever had. Before we parted ways, he offered me a job at Vertex Solutions. Junior developer, $65,000 a year. I accepted without hesitation. The first 2 years at Vertex were intense. I worked 60 to 70 hours a week. I learned everything I could from Marcus and the senior engineers. Every quarter, I received outstanding performance reviews. Marcus became my mentor and eventually my friend. He taught me that success was not about shouting from the rooftops. It was about showing up, doing the work, and letting the results speak for themselves. By year 3, I was promoted to senior developer. I led a small team of 5 people. We developed a critical feature for the company's main product that increased revenue by 15%. By year 5, I was managing the entire engineering department, a team of 40 people. The company had grown from 50 employees to over 150. My salary had doubled. I bought my first home in Denver, a modest townhouse with a view of the mountains. It was the first thing I had ever truly owned. By year 8, Marcus decided to retire. Before he left, he recommended me to take his place as vice president of engineering. The board agreed. 2 years later, the original founder wanted to step back. He asked me to take over as CEO. I was 32 years old, running a company with 500 employees and a valuation of over $1.2 billion. And here is where the story gets interesting. About 5 years before I became CEO, a resume came across my desk. It was flagged by Human Resources because the applicant shared my last name. I opened the file, and there it was. Brandon Matthews, my cousin. He had applied for a sales position at Vertex Solutions. I sat with that resume for a long time. Part of me wanted to reject it outright, but another part of me remembered what Marcus had taught me. Success is not about revenge. It is about integrity. So I made a decision. I would not interfere. I would let Brandon be evaluated like any other candidate, and I would make sure no one told him who I was. Brandon got the job. He joined a sales team on the other side of the building.